Look, I get it. Democracy's messy. I mean, everybody wants a seat at the table, and it can feel like your views and your opinions and your values and your religion doesn't get either equal time or the time that you feel like it deserves. And I can appreciate that. Sometimes you just want to go see a Disney movie with your kids without having to see some flamboyant character on the screen or some stereotype of a character or whatever, which the other side of that is if it wasn't, if Fox News didn't make it a big deal or some conservative media didn't make it a big deal, your kids don't know it's an issue unless you bring it up. And you probably wouldn't even bother you if Tucker Carlson wasn't talking about the green M&M. The thing about it is that as much as I understand, I get it. It's exhausting. And that's when we get tired of trying to carry it, is when these fascist ideas come up, which these are ideas that have not gone away since the beginning of our country. They started in the Civil War. And when the South lost, they didn't change those value systems. They stayed quiet for a really long time. They organized, they taught their kids, they passed their beliefs down generation to generation. They formed the KKK and the put together laws that discriminate against people. So over the last 40 years, really since the 70s, but more so since the 80s, we've had really an expansion of rights. And it's timing when we get exhausted, when we get tired, we start to slip on being vigilant, on holding up our democracy and our freedoms. Because let me tell you how it affects you personally. The theory, the idea, the basic 101 how to kill a democracy for dummies is you start putting laws on the books that are against a particular group. And very often you use pedophilia and to save the children to rile people up. Once you get these laws on the books, at that point, the hard work is finished. You just need to make amendments to them, which you can do quietly, and expand those laws to affect you personally, your livelihood, your family, and I'll give you an example. Black Lives Matter, right? So the uproar and anger against that allows certain states to put legislation in that does not allow peaceful protest, right? Or the laws are on the books to not just discourage, but to make in some cases illegal. Well, it doesn't upset people because they're like, if you're on a particular side and you're listening to a particular conservative narrative, you agree with that. But when it's your turn, when you're in an uproar, when you're upset about something, when they start coming for your rights, which they always do, you can't protest because you allowed that to happen to somebody else. Because once you start to chipping away those rights, you are fundamentally just going against our Constitution. And once you go against the Constitution and the First Amendment of all things, right, then you no longer are holding up the values and or believe in what democracy can give you. You don't believe in the ideals of a democracy for yourself, for your family, the freedoms that you want. You're not going to get freedom for one if you don't have freedom for all. That has been evident through history in not just our country, but in all countries where democracy fell. So there's something very important to realize, that this is not rocket science. It's very basic. People in democracies that don't want those democracies often target marginalized people. When they start taking their freedoms away and their ability to have agency over themselves and live within the Constitution, and when we're not expanding rights, when we're restricting them, you no longer have a democracy. You no longer have a free country. And that might be fine because you think it doesn't affect you, but it will affect you. And if it may not affect even you, if you're older, it may not affect you in your lifetime. But if you love your children, if you love your grandchildren, it will affect them if we don't change it. So that is my argument why we need to be vigilant about democracy and about freedoms. And religious freedom is the number one most important thing in this country. It's in the First Amendment, for God's sake. Religious freedom is in the First Amendment. So if you are using your religious ideologies to control somebody else's body, and you're trying to make an embryo, which let's all agree is life, but you're making an embryo have more rights than a woman, a living woman. Now we are now a third-class citizen. That means it goes man, embryo, woman. Do you see that? Do you see that argument? Man, embryo, woman. Once you put those laws on the books, then you just start chipping away at our freedoms. And once half of the country doesn't have the same rights as a man, we are spiraling. So I think it's very important to, for a moment, put your religious beliefs behind you and just think about how our country works as a democracy, and everybody should have a right to make their decisions. Those decisions don't have to be for you. You don't have to agree with them. You don't have to live your life by them. But that's the beauty of a free country. If it doesn't work for you, if you don't want abortion in your life, or that's not something that you want, if you can live your life how you want. But to push your religious beliefs to control somebody else's body, or to control what they read, or to control how they're taught in school from a religious doctrine. It's okay to teach all religions if you want to get a historical view of multi-religions, which I think would be very good and very eye-opening and very healthy for people to learn. But to just strip all of those learnings and focus on one is not religious freedom. It's indoctrination. And so we have to be very careful about using Christianity to push our own agenda onto people who aren't Christians, or who don't even believe Christianity in that form for those people, for their lives. So those are my arguments. Tell me if you agree. And if you have a really good counter argument, I'd love to hear it. All right. Thanks. Bye.